The things that my mind cannot fathom is how Paulo Costa has not been popped by USADA till now, and how does a world-class 30-year-old fighter manages to come across as a 15-year-old Naruto fanboy. But jokes aside, this should be one of the contenders for Fight of the Year because stylistically this has the potential to be a banger of a fight. Israel Adesanya is a counter striker and Paulo Costa's fighting style is to get right in your face and slug it out. And both of these styles have worked for both of these fighters so far because both of them are coming into this fight undefeated. Both these fighters fought Yoel Romero in their previous fights. While Paulo Costa defeated Yoel Romero in very impressive fashion, the less said about Israel Adesanya's fight against Romero the better. As Paulo Costa said, the only thing worse than Adesanya's current hairstyle is his fight against Romero. Side note, Israel Adesanya has been bested in all of their interviews by a guy who doesn't even speak English properly. Anyway, let's get to the breakdown. The first thing that I'm going to talk about is striking. Adesanya is one of the best, if not the best pure striker the UFC has ever seen. The guy utilizes his limbs in such tremendous fashion that it leaves you in awe. He put it perfectly when he said,
"Aiming, I don't throw in hope. I aim and fire, down the barrel."
I think it would not be an exaggeration if I say that Israel Adesanya is the best technical kickboxer on the planet right now. The way he uses his hands and especially his question mark kick is a thing of beauty. Even when he has his opponents hurt, he doesn't throw caution to the wind and he doesn't go all out. He still waits for the perfect moments to pick his spots, which makes him less vulnerable to getting clipped, which is why Israel Adesanya gets 10 out of 10 for striking. Paulo Costa, on the other hand, is the complete opposite and mostly depends on his power rather than technique. He just gets in your face and tries to hit you as hard as he can, and so far it has worked perfectly. There isn't anything technical about it, but is it entertaining? Yes, it is, which is why he gets 6 out of 10 for his striking. The next thing that we're going to talk about is footwork. We all know Israel Adesanya's footwork is unparalleled as evident from his fight against Romero in which he got on his bike and ran his way to victory. But in all seriousness, the man can give Dominic Cruz a run for his money when it comes to footwork. Any elite striker needs good footwork to go with his striking because if you plant your feet in one place and not move around, you're not just bound to get hit, but you'll also become predictable. Moving around keeps your opponent guessing and allows you to catch him off guard. Adesanya's footwork is one of the major reasons why he's so good at what he does. Israel Adesanya constantly sticks and moves. The guy sticks his opponents and moves so quickly that when his opponent tries to counter him back, they usually hit thin air, which frustrates them into making mistakes, which is why Adesanya gets 9 out of 10 for his footwork. Paulo Costa, on the other hand, doesn't move around much. He tries to push you against the fence and plants his feet, which allows him to generate a lot of power, and then he just swings for the fences. Planting his feet and not moving around allows Costa to generate a lot of power, but it also leaves him vulnerable to getting clipped. Therefore, Paulo Costa gets 5 out of 10 for his footwork, and I'm being generous. Now let's talk about head movement. Good head movement is always a treat to watch, and Israel Adesanya's head movement is straight out of an action movie. Good head movement isn't just a treat to watch, and I don't want to be Captain Obvious here, but it is also very beneficial for the fighter because it allows the fighter to have many counter opportunities, and if you are even half as good of a striker as Adesanya is, you do not need many to knock your opponent's lights out. Now some would argue that Israel Adesanya got clipped by Gastelum a lot in their fight, but Israel Adesanya is one of the few fighters who actually improves after every fight and not just say that they got better after their fight, as evident from the fact that he made Robert Whittaker punch thin air, and I think most people would agree with me that the Reaper is a better striker than Kelvin Gastelum. Also, I just realized that Kelvin Gastelum does not have a nickname, or does he? I just cannot seem to remember. Anyway, Israel Adesanya gets 10 out of 10 for his head movement. Now let's talk about Paulo Costa's head movement or lack thereof. The guy is basically a human punching bag. Sometimes he's so fixated on trying to hit his opponent that he totally forgets that his opponent can punch too. And I'm not a stats guy, but the fact that Paulo Costa has absorbed 7 significant strikes per minute and landed 8 significant strikes per minute in his 5 UFC fights says a lot. Israel Adesanya, on the other hand, has absorbed only 2 significant strikes per minute in his 8 UFC fights, and most of them were against Kelvin Gastelum, which is why Paulo Costa gets 5 out of 10 for his head movement. I know talking about the ground game for this fight is just redundant because the probability of this fight going to the ground is 1 in a million because none of these guys are wrestlers and have never attempted a takedown. But even if one shot for a takedown, it won't be a successful one because the takedown defense of Adesanya and Costa are 86 and 80% respectively. Head movement, strikes, footwork, everything requires speed and agility. If you don't do these things fast enough and give enough time to your opponent to react to your movement, it will be disastrous to say the least. When it comes to speed, Adesanya has ample. The fact that Adesanya's opponents have trouble hitting him and don't see Adesanya's punches and kicks coming is because he does all of it very quickly. Everything Adesanya does is sudden. By the time his opponents realize what is happening, they are already punched in the face twice. Costa, on the other hand, is just sluggish. Most of his punches are telegraphed, they still land, but that is mostly because he throws a lot and some of them are bound to get through. And also because the guy is just a freak of nature. He breaks through his opponent's guard with sheer force, not technique. Costa is considerably slower than Adesanya, mostly because of Costa's humongous size. The guy is just an absolute beast and it's just basic physics. If you're going to be as big as Costa, you're definitely going to compromise some of your speed, which is why Adesanya gets 9 out of 10 for his speed and Costa gets 6 out of 10. Now let's talk about the reach of these two guys. Adesanya has a big 8-inch reach advantage over Costa, which would allow him to keep Costa at bay and try to pick Costa apart from the outside. Costa, because of the much shorter reach, would try to get in the metaphorical phone booth because if he doesn't and stays on the outside, Adesanya will definitely light him up. Now let's talk about the game changer for Paulo Costa, his knockout power. One thing that Costa has got in abundance and Adesanya does not is one-punch knockout power. Adesanya will need a lot of punches to land clean to knock out Paulo Costa. Costa, on the other hand, will only need one punch to land cleanly to knock Adesanya's lights out. I mean, the guy has 11 knockouts in his 13 fights, which is why Adesanya gets 6.5 out of 10 for his knockout power and Costa gets 9 out of 10 for his knockout power. Now let's talk about the chin on these two guys. None of these guys have lost in their professional MMA careers, but the fact that Adesanya has been knocked out twice in his kickboxing career and the fact that Kelvin Gastelum was able to rock Adesanya makes me question his chin and whether he would be able to handle Costa's power because Costa hits a lot harder than Kelvin Gastelum. Paulo Costa, on the other hand, has shown he can take a lot of punches and still keep coming at you without even a grimace on his face. I mean, the guy traded punches with Yoel Romero without getting knocked out, which is why Adesanya gets 7 out of 10 for his chin and Paulo Costa gets 9 out of 10. I feel like the most important aspect of the fight game, especially a 5-round fight, is the gas tank because it doesn't matter if you've got the knockout power of Francis Ngannou, the speed of Cody Garbrandt, and the octagon IQ of John Jones if that gas tank runs out in 5 minutes. Paulo Costa has only won 3 rounds in one fight and that was in his last fight against Yoel Romero. Costa won the first 2 rounds but started gassing out in the third and was dominated by Yoel Romero in the third, which clearly demonstrates the guy cannot keep the pace for 3 rounds, let alone 5 rounds. And for good reason though, packing that much muscle uses a lot of energy. The bigger you are, the faster your gas tank is gonna run out. Israel Adesanya, on the other hand, has shown he can handle himself when the fight goes to deeper waters and keep doing what he does, if not better, in the later rounds, which is why Adesanya gets 8.5 out of 10 for his gas tank, while Costa gets 6 out of 10. Now let's talk about the form these two guys are in. Both of them are undefeated. Adesanya and Costa have a perfect record of 18-0 and 13-0 respectively, and both of them have thrown to the middleweight division. Adesanya, one might argue, has got better names on his resume, but the fact of the matter is it is history in the making because it is a rare occurrence for 2 undefeated fighters to fight for the undisputed belt. Anyway, Adesanya gets 9.5 out of 10 for his form, while Paulo Costa gets 9 out of 10. Now if one takes a look at this table, he will realize Adesanya is better at almost everything than Costa except when it comes to knockout power and chin. Paulo Costa is going to be the most dangerous in the first round and it is almost a guarantee that Costa is going to come out guns blazing and will try to put Adesanya to sleep as early in the fight as possible because I think he knows he cannot go the complete 5 rounds, and if Adesanya survives the first round, the chances of Costa winning decreases dramatically. Because once that gas tank runs out, Costa's power will follow suit, and the third, fourth and fifth round almost certainly will belong to Adesanya. And if this fight goes into the fourth and fifth round, Adesanya might TKO Costa, not because Costa will be put to sleep, but because Costa would have no gas in his tank to even throw a punch. And once that happens, Adesanya will decimate Paulo Costa. So in the end, it all comes down to how Paulo Costa manages his gas tank.